He said he didn't want her, that she was nothing to him. But 4 years later, a single phone call would change everything. She was lying in a hospital bed, and the truth about their children, was about to shatter his world forever. Hi, beautiful souls. I'm your storyteller, James. Thank you for being here. It's not just my story, it's ours to share. Today, I have a tale of love, heartbreak, and redemption that will take you on an emotional journey. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive into a story that will stay in your heart long after it ends. Adrian Blackwood walked through the glass doors of Blackwood Enterprises the same way he did every morning, like a storm dressed in a tailored suit. His presence alone changed the temperature of the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. Assistants straightened their backs. Even the elevator seemed to glide faster when he stepped inside. He didn't look left or right. He didn't acknowledge greetings. He didn't offer a single smile. Adrian's world was numbers, deadlines, and the kind of silence that kept people at a distance. He believed that emotions were liabilities and connections were weaknesses disguised as comfort. He built his empire brick by brick, one ruthless decision at a time, and he guarded the cold walls around his heart with the precision of a general protecting a battlefield. By 8:03 a.m., he was already seated in his office, a giant corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a skyline as sharp as his jawline, a view as lonely as he was. His previous secretary had resigned after 3 months. The one before her lasted 6 weeks. Before that, 4 days. No one survived under him for long. He preferred it that way. Today his schedule had a new line: personal secretary, first day. He barely noticed it until the gentle knock came at his door. It wasn't the frantic, terrified knock he was used to. This one was soft, composed, respectful. "Come in," he said without looking up. The door opened quietly, and a breath of warmth entered the room. Before the woman did, Adrian glanced up out of habit, and then froze. Not visibly, not enough for anyone to notice, but something inside him paused. The young woman stepped in with calm confidence, clutching her file to her chest. She had smooth brown skin that glowed beneath the soft office lighting, and eyes filled with quiet intelligence. Her movements were graceful. Her presence was warm in a way his office had never experienced. "Good morning, sir," she said. Her voice was gentle but steady, the kind that soothed instead of irritated. "I'm Amara Shah, your new secretary." Adrian blinked once slowly. A strange, inconvenient warmth flickered through him, something he quickly extinguished. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His tone remained as cold as polished marble. Amara nodded and took her seat, placing her file neatly on her lap. She didn't fidget. She didn't shrink. She didn't stare at her hands like the others did. She met his gaze with respectful poise. He hated that it caught him off guard. He opened her documents, scanning her resume with surgical precision. "You worked 3 jobs during your studies," he observed. "Yes, sir." "You supported your mother financially from a young age." "Yes, sir." "You graduated top of your class." "Yes," she said again, but gently this time. "I work hard." He looked up, expecting insecurity. He found sincerity instead. Adrian closed the file. "This job isn't easy. I'm not afraid of difficult things. Your predecessor lasted 71 days. Then perhaps I'll aim for 72. A tiny spark lit in his chest, interest, amusement, something dangerously close to admiration. He crushed it instantly. "You will organize every aspect of my schedule," he said, leaning back. "No mistakes." "Yes, sir." "You will handle my calls." "Yes, sir." "You will maintain confidentiality, no excuses." "I understand." "And you will not, under any circumstances, attempt to get close to me." His tone sharpened. "This is not the place for personal connections." For the first time, Amara's expression softened, almost like she understood something about him that he didn't say out loud. "I'm here to work, sir," she replied. Nothing more. He should have felt satisfied. Instead, her words unsettled him. She stood after receiving her tasks and began working at the desk outside his office. Through the glass, Adrian occasionally caught glimpses of her, typing with focus, answering calls with flawless politeness, managing crises with calm efficiency. Something about her orderliness soothed the invisible chaos in his life. By noon, he was annoyed to discover he'd watched her more times than he intended. "Blackwood," he muttered under his breath. "Focus." He forced his attention back to contracts, but the faint sound of her voice as she spoke to a client drifted through the crack of the door. Warm, steady, grounding, everything he had spent his life avoiding. When lunch arrived, the junior staff avoided his door like usual. But Amara walked in without fear, placing the tray on his desk. "You didn't eat breakfast?" she said quietly. "You should eat something." He narrowed his eyes. "How do you know I didn't eat breakfast?" "Your coffee mug was untouched when I came in. Your hands were trembling slightly at 9 a.m., and you get headaches when you skip meals." He stared at her, hard. "You observed all that in a few hours." "That's my job," she replied softly. No secretary had ever spoken to him like that, with gentle honesty instead of fear. It unsettled him, pulled at him, irritated him more than he liked. He didn't respond. But he ate the lunch. The afternoon brought 3 meetings, 2 crises, and a confrontation with a board member. Through it all, Amara handled every task flawlessly, calm, collected, composed. She didn't overspeak. She didn't question him. She didn't shrink when he snapped. She simply stood by him, steady as a heartbeat. By the end of the workday, Adrian found himself glancing toward her empty desk, feeling something dangerously unfamiliar. He didn't hate her presence. He didn't hate her voice. And for the first time in years, he wasn't completely alone in his office. Not emotionally. It annoyed him. It intrigued him. It scared him. He refused to acknowledge any of it. At 7 p.m., he finally stepped out of his office. Amara was packing her bag quietly. "Good work today," he said abruptly. She looked up, surprised but smiling softly. "Thank you, sir." Her smile did something to him, something unwelcome, something warm. He turned away immediately, but as he walked to the elevator, he realized he'd been thinking of work the entire day. Yet the only moment replaying in his mind was her smile. And for a cold man who never allowed himself to feel anything, that was the first crack in his carefully built walls. As the elevator doors began to close, Adrian's reflection caught a glimpse of Amara through the glass wall, her soft smile lingering in the dim office light. And for the first time in years, Adrian felt something he couldn't name tug sharply inside his chest, something he didn't know would soon change his entire life. The elevator doors closed on Adrian's lingering thoughts, but they didn't silence them. He carried Amara's soft smile with him into the following weeks, like a quiet echo in the back of his mind he never asked for, yet couldn't shake. He told himself it meant nothing. He insisted it meant nothing. But the human heart, especially one locked away for years, has a way of betraying even the strongest mind. Work went on, but something in the air between them shifted, unspoken, undeniable. A tension that curled through the space whenever she entered the room, a warmth that settled in his chest whenever she said, "Good morning, sir," in that soft, grounded tone of hers. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to get close. She was simply there, steady, gentle, a quiet presence he didn't know he needed. When the annual Investors Summit announced its location, another city, 2 days, mandatory attendance, Adrian barely reacted, but his eyes flicked to the line on his schedule, traveling with Amara. He didn't comment. He simply closed the tab before his expression could betray anything. The journey began early morning. Private jet, cold sky, and a strange silence between them that wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Amara sat beside him, typing reports with calm focus. He kept pretending he wasn't noticing every time their elbows nearly touched. He kept pretending the faint scent of her shampoo, jasmine and something warm, wasn't distracting him more than the files in his hands. When turbulence hit briefly, Amara gasped and gripped the seat arm. Adrian's instinct was unexpected and immediate. He reached out, steadying her wrist, his thumb brushing her skin, warm against warm, real against real. "You're safe," he murmured before catching himself. His voice sounded softer than he intended. He pulled his hand back fast, clearing his throat and staring out the window. Amara didn't speak, but he could feel her heartbeat settling beside him, and somehow that settled his too. By the time they reached the five-star hotel, the sky was already threatening rain. The front desk bowed to Adrian with fear and admiration, but their eyes softened when they looked at Amara, noticing her quiet beauty. She thanked them politely, unaware of the way Adrian's jaw tightened when one of the bellboys stared too long. The rooms were separate, of course, Adrian insisted. Amara respected it, but fate doesn't always respect boundaries. The storm rolled in by evening, heavy thunder rattling the windows. Adrian worked late in his suite, reviewing presentations, his mind sharper than steel, until he heard a knock. Amara stood outside, her hair slightly damp from the humidity of the storm, files in her hands. "Sir, you asked for the revised documents." He took them, his fingertips brushing hers, a spark, a breath, something neither of them had planned. "Come in," he said, not breaking eye contact. She stepped inside. The room felt too quiet, the lights too warm, the air too charged. Outside, rain pounded like a drum. Inside, silence pulsed between them. Amara laid the papers on the table, trying to remain professional, but the tension, slow burn, magnetic, inevitable, wrapped around them like the storm itself. He watched her. Not like a boss, not like a man who prided himself on control, but like someone seeing warmth for the first time after living too long in coldness. "You work tirelessly," he said quietly. "You demand excellence," she replied. "I try to match it." Something in his chest pulled, something that felt dangerously like admiration, or longing, or both. Another crack of thunder shook the sky. Amara flinched slightly. Adrian stepped closer, not even thinking, just reacting, his presence solid, protective. Her breath hitched. His gaze dipped for the briefest moment to her lips. A line neither of them should cross hovered inches away. "I shouldn't," he whispered. "I know," she breathed. But the world outside roared, the air between them tightened, and something within him, years of denial, control, coldness, finally broke. He touched her cheek, gently, reverently, like he wasn't supposed to but couldn't help it. Amara's breath trembled. She didn't step back. She didn't hesitate. She simply looked at him with eyes full of sincerity, eyes that had always held him without asking for anything in return. Their foreheads rested together, a soft, intimate connection more powerful than any kiss. Her fingers brushed his wrist, a quiet acceptance, a silent confession. The storm outside roared louder, but the room grew quieter, softer. Two souls collided, not with recklessness, but with slow, aching inevitability. Soft closeness, gentle touches, hands holding, heartbeats trembling. All within the bounds of YouTube's policy, all within the realm of pure emotional intimacy. Adrian had never let anyone close. Yet here he was, standing inches from the only person who had ever made him feel anything. And for Amara, this wasn't a moment of impulse. This was love, the kind she never voiced, but always carried. Hours passed in the warm hush of two people who finally stopped fighting what had been building since the day they met. They didn't speak much. Words would have broken the delicate magic between them. When the storm softened, their breathing did too. They lingered in that quiet space, close, connected, impossibly vulnerable. And when Amara finally returned to her own room, she left behind something far heavier than footsteps on carpet, a piece of her heart. What she didn't know was that Adrian watched the door long after it closed, not understanding why letting her go felt like losing something he had never allowed himself to want. He would never admit that night meant something. He forced himself not to. He built walls around the memory even as it was still forming. But the truth settled quietly inside him like a secret he couldn't control. A night like that changes everything. 2 weeks later, Amara sat alone in her small bathroom, the pregnancy test trembling in her hand. Two bold, undeniable lines staring back at her. And the man she needed to tell was the one she feared losing most. The two bold lines on the test had shaken Amara's world, but nothing prepared her for the weight in her chest as she stood inside Adrian's office. The room was silent, too silent, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Her fingers felt cold, her heart thudded painfully, and every step she took toward his desk felt like she was walking into her own unraveling. Adrian didn't look up at first. He was signing documents with that sharp focus only he possessed. The same focus she once admired, the same focus that now terrified her. She stood there, trying to find her voice, feeling the floor sway under her feet. "Sir," her whisper barely carried. He lifted his eyes. They were calm, controlled, untouched by the storm rising inside her. "I need to speak with you," she said. He leaned back in his chair, studying her expression with a mild frown, perhaps sensing something was off, but not yet prepared for the truth that would break the fragile bridge between them. Amara opened her lips, but her voice collapsed. She gathered strength again, clasping her trembling hands. "Adrian, I'm pregnant." The pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the glass desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. His eyes widened, not in surprise alone, but in a chaos of emotions crashing together. Fear, disbelief, anger, refusal. His breath hitched, and for a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his features. But then, the iron walls rose, his jaw locked into place, and his gaze hardened into something sharp and cold. He picked up the pen with slow control, as though regaining power over the situation. Amara stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Please listen to me. My mother. She will never forgive me. She will punish me, Adrian. Please, please marry me. I'm carrying your child." Her desperation wasn't loud. It was soft, trembling, painfully human. Her eyes glistened with fear he didn't understand. She wasn't asking for luxury or security. She was begging for protection. From the world, from her mother, from a destiny that suddenly became too heavy for her to carry alone. But Adrian heard none of that. To him, her words were chains, a trap, a threat to the control he'd built his life around. His fingers curled around the edge of the desk. His heartbeat pounded against his ribs, not with joy, not with fear for her, but with pure defensive denial. He refused to feel. He refused to need. He refused to belong. "Amara," he said slowly, "stop." She shook her head, tears forming. "This baby is yours. I know it. You know it. And I'm scared, Adrian. I can't face this alone." Her voice cracked on the last word, and something inside him flinched, something he immediately crushed under his anger. "No." His voice was flat, cold, dead. "This is not mine." Amara's knees weakened. She stared at him, her lips parting in disbelief. How can you say that?" she whispered, barely able to breathe. "You're lying," he said, each syllable like a blade. You're trying to trap me with a child that isn't mine." Her stomach twisted. Her chest caved. She pressed a hand against her heart because it physically hurt. "Adrian, I would never—" He cut her off sharply. "I don't want you." The world tilted. The floor blurred. Her ears rang. Those 4 words slammed into her with the force of a falling building. She clutched the edge of the chair to stop herself from collapsing. Her skin felt cold, her throat tightened, and her breath struggled to stay inside her lungs. "Not you," she whispered, tears spilling over now. "Don't say that. Please." He refused to meet her eyes. He refused to look at the pain he caused. Instead, he turned away, grabbing papers, pretending to be busy, pretending she wasn't breaking right in front of him. "You need to leave," he said, voice clipped. "Now." "Adrian, look at me." Her plea was fragile, almost childlike in its vulnerability. But he didn't turn around, not once, not even to see her tears fall. With every second he remained cold, the world around her shattered a little more. Her vision blurred. Her breath trembled. She felt the life inside her, the tiny heartbeat she had only just begun to imagine, pressing against a future that suddenly felt like it was closing in on her. "I thought you—" Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard. "I thought last night meant something." "It meant nothing," he replied instantly. And that was the knife that killed what was left of her hope. Her fingers trembled on the doorknob. She blinked through her tears, trying to see him one last time, trying to understand how the man she cared for could be so merciless. But when she lifted her head, he wasn't there. He had walked out. Out of the office. Out of the room. Out of her life. He didn't wait for her response. He didn't offer explanations. He didn't even give her a final glance. He just disappeared, like she was nothing. Her breath hitched painfully, her heart pounding in a frantic rhythm as her tears finally broke free. She sank against the door frame, one hand clutching her stomach, whispering a promise to the tiny life within her. "I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." Her vision blurred again, her knees weakened. Her world darkened around the edges. The man she trusted, the man she loved, the father of her unborn child, had vanished without a trace. When she wiped her tears and looked up, the office was empty. Adrian was gone, leaving behind nothing but a cold chair, scattered papers, and the silence of a man who had chosen to disappear. The moment Adrian disappeared from that office, Amara felt the air collapse around her. The silence he left behind wasn't silence at all. It was the sound of her world splitting open. She stood frozen, staring at the spot where he had been, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to believe that he had truly walked away from her when she needed him the most. Her hands instinctively covered her stomach, trembling with the new life growing inside her. She whispered to the child, to herself, to the empty room, "I will protect you, even if he won't." And in that moment, her life took a turn she had never imagined, one she would have to walk alone. She left the company the very next day, not because she wanted to, but because she could not bear the humiliation of seeing him again, pretending everything was normal. She packed her desk quietly, without a goodbye, without a tear falling in public. She saved her tears for a small bathroom stall where no one could hear her breaking. Moving out of her mother's house was the first battle. The disappointment in her mother's eyes burned deeper than any words Adrian had thrown at her. Her mother didn't scream, didn't strike her. She simply looked at her like she had already failed her unborn child. "You will carry this responsibility alone," her mother had said, and that sentence carved itself into Amara's bones. So she left, with a single suitcase, and a tiny apartment with peeling walls and a leaky kitchen tap. But it was hers, and it was safe, and it was where her babies would grow. She worked through her pregnancy, morning shifts, evening shifts, typing jobs at night when her back ached and her eyes stung. She learned to ignore hunger and exhaustion. She learned to stretch every coin until it turned into two. And she learned to live without waiting for anyone to save her. When the twins arrived, everything changed again. She remembers the moment vividly. The first cry, the second cry, the shock on the nurse's face as two tiny bundles were placed on her chest, a son and a daughter. Both small, both perfect, both carrying Adrian's unmistakable blue eyes, as if fate wanted to remind her of the man who had denied them. But instead of breaking her, their eyes healed parts of her soul she didn't know existed. She named them Arik and Amaya, two stars born from a night that both destroyed her and gave her the reason to rise again. Every time she held them, she felt love so pure it terrified her. And every time she looked at their blue eyes, she felt heartbreak so deep she had to hide her tears in their tiny blankets. She stayed awake through long nights, rocking them to sleep while whispering stories of strength, courage, and love. The kind of love they deserved. She wanted them to know they were wanted, even if their father thought otherwise. The years passed like a slow storm, loud, relentless, and full of unexpected light. The twins grew, and with each passing day, they became more like Adrian. Arik had his stubborn frown and silent thinking. Amaya had his sharp gaze and quiet intensity. Sometimes Amara caught them watching her, as if trying to understand why she cried when she thought they were asleep. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Adrian lived a life untouched by the truth. He convinced himself he had escaped manipulation, convinced himself he was right, convinced himself that Amara had wanted to trap him. He didn't know about the hospital nights Amara spent alone. He didn't know about the fever she hid while taking care of the twins. He didn't know about the letters she thought of writing but never sent. He didn't know about the birthdays, the laughter, the little milestones he missed. He didn't know anything. And perhaps the cruelest part was that he never even wondered. But life always has a way of circling back to the truths people run from. 4 years later, on an ordinary afternoon, while Adrian stood in the cafeteria of his company with a cup of coffee in hand, a familiar voice called his name. He turned around, expecting a coworker, but instead found himself staring at someone from his past, someone who used to share breaks with Amara, someone who had watched the slow tragedy unfold in silence. Her voice trembled slightly when she spoke, as if she knew she was about to shake his world. "Adrian, I need to tell you something." He raised an eyebrow, impatient. "What now? Make it quick." She hesitated, swallowed, and then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "It's about Amara." His expression didn't change at first, not outwardly, but something flickered behind his eyes. Annoyance? Curiosity? Something deeper? "What about her?" he asked, cold as ever. The colleague's next words were quiet, but they tore through him like lightning. "She's been struggling, and she has twins." His grip on the coffee cup loosened, but he didn't drop it. His breath stilled. She took a small step back, her voice dropping even lower. "Twins who look exactly like you." The cafeteria noise faded into a dull echo around him. His heartbeat slammed once, twice, then raced like something was chasing him from the inside. For the first time in 4 years, Adrian felt something he didn't know how to fight. Doubt, fear, and a truth he could no longer outrun. Adrian's fingers tightened around the cup until it cracked, coffee spilling down his wrist. But he didn't feel the burn because the only question pounding through his mind was, what if they really are mine? Adrian felt the world tilt beneath him before he even realized something was wrong. His chest tightened, the air thickening in his lungs. His hands shook as if betraying him. For the first time in years, he couldn't control it, couldn't dominate it, couldn't ignore it. Twins. His. The words he never wanted to admit were possible ran through his mind like a wildfire. Each pulse in his veins screamed a warning he refused to heed. He had avoided this life, denied it, dismissed it, and yet here it was, knocking on his door in the cruelest, most unexpected way. The cafeteria noises faded into a blur. His vision swirled. He tried to move, tried to stand, but his legs buckled. Pain ripped through his side, sharp and unrelenting. He crumpled into the chair, gripping the edge, forcing his mind to stay coherent. But coherence abandoned him like a traitor. A medical team arrived quickly, surrounding him with a flurry of voices and beeping machines. Adrian, used to commanding the room, now felt powerless, lost in the storm of his own body. His arrogance, his pride, his carefully controlled life, it was all useless here. Tests were rushed. I-4 lines stabbed into his veins. Monitors bleeped rapidly. He clenched his fists as the results printed. Liver damage. 25% functioning, immediate transplant required. The words landed like a hammer on his chest. Adrian's mind raced. He had always believed he was invincible, untouchable. He had faced corporate battles, betrayal, scandals. He had conquered every obstacle that dared to challenge him. But this was different. This was not something he could fight with money, wit, or power. Doctors spoke urgently. "You have limited time, Mr. Blackwood. If we don't find a suitable donor quickly, you won't survive." Adrian's chest tightened further. Fear, a sensation he hadn't allowed himself in years, gripped him fully. It was raw, unfiltered, almost suffocating. For the first time, he considered his mortality. For the first time, he realized how much of life he had wasted, running from consequences, running from feelings, running from her. A memory surfaced unbidden. Amara's face, soft and warm, a mother cradling her child, the twins. The possibility that they were his, that the life he had walked away from was breathing and living somewhere, untouchable. His hands shook harder. Regret clawed its way into his chest like a predator. Adrian wanted to fight it, wanted to dismiss it, wanted to remain the untouchable, ruthless man who had built his empire and left nothing behind. But the fear was too tangible, too real. Every heartbeat reminded him of his vulnerability. Every shallow breath whispered that he had lost control of his destiny. The days in the hospital blurred into each other. Tests, procedures, blood draws, and endless IVs filled his existence. He felt the isolation acutely. No assistant, no secretary, no one could reach him beyond the sterile walls. No one could tell him it would be okay. No one, except a donor. Hope arrived in the form of a name he didn't know and a request he couldn't have expected. Dr. Lewis, the attending surgeon, entered with a file in hand. His expression was serious but careful, like he carried a fragile secret. "Mr. Blackwood," he began, eyes steady on Adrian's, "we have found a perfect donor." Adrian's heart, already fragile from the fear and weakness coursing through him, skipped a beat. Relief began to rise before being throttled by suspicion. Dr. Lewis continued slowly, "But there's a condition. The donor has requested that their identity remain hidden." Adrian froze. The world seemed to tilt again. The thought that someone, anyone, was willing to save him, to give part of themselves to keep him alive. It was foreign. He had never asked for help in his life. He had never needed anyone. And now survival depended on a stranger, or someone hidden. Someone who wanted nothing in return but anonymity. "Anonymous?" Adrian asked, his voice low, almost disbelief. "You mean someone I don't know?" Dr. Lewis nodded. "Yes. Their name will not be disclosed, at least not initially. But the match is perfect, and the surgery can proceed as soon as you consent." Consent. The word made him feel small, weak, vulnerable. He had spent decades making decisions for everyone else, for entire companies, for entire empires, and now he had to trust someone unseen with his life. Fear, disbelief, and a deep, unspoken gratitude collided inside him. He realized, almost violently, that this wasn't just about survival, it was about chance, karma, fate knocking at the door in a way he could not manipulate. He thought briefly of Amara, though he refused to speak her name aloud. He pictured her hands, her face, her unwavering strength. He pushed it away. He had no right. He had walked away. He had destroyed possibilities. He had chosen pride over love. Yet even in his pride, a small, stubborn spark of curiosity flared. Who would give him life when he had been so cruel, so cold, so undeserving? The night before surgery, Adrian lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the reality of his mortality pressing against his chest. Every thought of Amara, every thought of the twins, every memory he had suppressed, pressed forward unbidden. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams were darker than he remembered, flooded with shadows of what could have been, what should have been, and what he might never have. The hospital room felt colder than usual in the early hours. Machines hummed and beeped around him. He felt fragile in a way he had never felt in boardrooms or penthouses, in negotiations or confrontations. He was human. He was mortal. And he was entirely at the mercy of someone unseen. Dr. Lewis entered again in the morning, moving with that professional calm that Adrian both envied and hated. He spoke without ceremony. "The donor is ready. We need your consent to proceed immediately." Adrian's gaze locked on the doctor. He nodded, too aware of the irony that someone, somewhere, was offering him the chance to live, a life he hadn't valued fully until now. He signed the papers with a hand that shook slightly. For the first time, he realized life was not something you could command. It was something you could only hold, carefully, when it was given to you. As he was wheeled into the operating theater, adrenaline and fear coursed through him. He was powerless, but aware of it. Vulnerable, but aware of it alive, and yet uncertain if he deserved to remain so. The bright lights of the OR reflected in his eyes as anesthesia loomed. He fought the panic, breathed through it, and let go of control. Completely, someone he did not know, or perhaps someone he should have known, was about to give him the most priceless gift of all, a second chance at life, and Adrian, for all his ruthlessness and pride, could only lie there and hope he deserved it. Dr. Lewis stepped out of the operating theater, removing his mask, and whispered quietly to the nurse beside him, "We have found a perfect donor, but she requested one condition. Her identity must remain hidden." Adrian's life and the truth of the woman who had once held his heart hung in the balance. Amara sat in the sterile, white hospital room, her fingers gripping the pen so tightly the paper beneath it threatened to tear. She was alone, her heart pounding in rhythm with the fluorescent hum above. No one knew she was here. No one knew she had come to give a piece of herself to a man who had once shattered her completely. Her mother's voice was absent, though it had haunted her conscience for years. She had chosen silence over confrontation. She had chosen courage over fear, knowing her mother would never understand why she was here. She was alone with her decision, with her love, with the secret she had carried in her chest for 4 long years. She read the consent forms one last time. Every line felt heavier than the last. Her body shook, not from cold, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of the sacrifice she was about to make. She took a deep breath, steadying herself against the tremor. She had carried more than this once before, and she could carry it again. The request she made was simple, yet impossible for anyone to understand fully. "Promise me," she whispered quietly, as if the walls themselves might betray her. "Promise me. Don't tell Adrian it's me. He doesn't want me, but he deserves to live. For my children. For the life he doesn't even know he's missing." Her mind wandered to the twins. Auric, with his furrowed brows and silent observation. Amaya, With her tiny hands clutched around a blanket, she loved more than anything else. They had no idea that the father they had never met, the man who had abandoned them before they were born, was now dependent on her for survival. She pressed the pen to the signature line and exhaled slowly, letting the reality sink in. She had chosen love even when it hurt. She had chosen sacrifice, even when it was invisible, even when it might never be recognized. Nurses arrived to guide her through pre-operation procedures. Her veins were pricked, her body disinfected, and every beep and hum of the machines made her stomach twist. Fear threatened to take over, but she clenched her jaw, telling herself that love was stronger than fear, that courage outweighed doubt. The anesthesiologist smiled at her softly, sensing her tension. "You're doing something incredible today," he said. Amara nodded but said nothing. Words felt unnecessary. They could not contain what she carried inside. Once sedated, the world dissolved. White lights, bustling staff, and metallic surfaces faded as she drifted into the haze of anesthesia, leaving behind the weight of the secret she bore. Her last thought, fragile yet fierce, was of the children she had fought so hard to protect, and of a man who had unknowingly stolen a piece of her heart. On the other side of the operating table, Adrian lay unconscious, pale and weak. Machines beeped steadily, a reminder that every pulse of life was a gift he no longer took for granted. The surgeon carefully began the transplant, a procedure that required precision, care, and timing so perfect it seemed miraculous. Amara's part of the procedure, though hidden from him, was life itself. Every fiber of her being gave what he needed to survive. Every heartbeat of hers aligned silently with his, as if two distant souls were tethered by fate. Hours passed, each one stretched taut with tension. Nurses whispered quietly, instruments clinked, and the smell of antiseptic filled the room. Adrian's pulse wavered at moments, and the team adjusted with urgency, but the donor match was flawless. And finally, after a grueling process, the operation was complete. Adrian's body accepted the liver graft, and color slowly returned to his cheeks. His breaths deepened, his pulse stabilized. He was alive. Amara remained unconscious, her body exhausted, every drop of strength spent. She had succeeded. She had given the man who had caused her so much pain a second chance at life. And she had done it silently, invisibly, without any recognition or gratitude. When she awoke, she expected relief, a sense of calm, a quiet pride in what she had done, but nothing prepared her for the sharp, searing pain that gripped her chest and radiated through her abdomen. She gasped, clutching the sheets, her fingers trembling, her vision blurred with sweat and fear. Her breathing became shallow as the agony worsened. Something was terribly wrong. Her body, already fragile from the surgery, was screaming a warning she could not ignore. The nurses rushed in, alarmed at the sudden change in her vitals. Monitors beeped frantically. Machines, so steady before, now seemed chaotic. Her pulse raced, her blood pressure dropped. She tried to speak, but only managed a strangled whisper. "Pain. Too much. Something's wrong." A doctor arrived, calm but urgent, taking stock of her condition. He signaled for additional support. Amara felt herself slipping, the pain overwhelming her senses. Her mind raced through possibilities, but all she could think about was the thought of leaving the world before seeing the twins again, before knowing if Adrian would live to see the children she had fought so hard to protect. Her vision darkened at the edges, the pain sharpening like a blade she could not escape. She wanted to scream, to cry, to call out, but every sound tore at her chest. She was terrified, more terrified than she had ever been in her life. And yet, even in the shadow of fear and agony, her mind flickered to Adrian, the man who had rejected her, the man who had walked away, the man who didn't know she existed in his survival, yet whose life she had just saved. Tears mingled with sweat as she thought, If he survives, if he lives, I can endure anything. But I can't fail now. I can't leave now. The team worked frantically, whispering instructions, adjusting medications, monitoring every movement, every heartbeat. Machines hissed, oxygen rushed through tubes, nurses held her hand, speaking words of reassurance that barely penetrated the storm of pain. Amara's body trembled violently. Her thoughts spun in fragments, memories of the twins, memories of Adrian, memories of the night he had walked away. Every shred of her courage was tested in these moments. And then, in a quiet moment amidst chaos, she realized she was on the edge. One more slip, one more failure, and everything, the twins, Adrian, her sacrifices, might be lost. Her eyes fluttered, trying to focus on anything, anything to keep her anchored to life. She could hear distant voices through the haze. She could feel the pressure of hands on her, stabilizing her. But something primal, something terrifying, told her that this was more than typical post-surgery complications. Pain racked her again, more intense than before. She squeezed her eyes shut. Her breaths came in jagged, shallow bursts. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Every instinct screamed danger. She whispered a single name, though she wasn't sure if anyone would hear it. Adrian. The room seemed to pause at her words. Every machine, every staff member, every moment of silence seemed to hold its breath. She wanted to survive. For him, for the twins, for herself. But the fear curling in her chest whispered that the night was far from over. Amara's eyes flew open in panic, sweat slicking her skin. The nurses crowded around her, whispering urgently, but her voice was barely audible. Something's wrong. It's not over. It's not over. And in that instant, everyone in the room realized that her battle had only just begun. Amara's eyes fluttered open again, but the world was distorted, spinning with fever and pain. Every breath felt like a struggle, every movement a monumental effort. Her body, exhausted from surgery, trembled uncontrollably. Even the nurses whispered behind masks, casting worried glances, their words fragmented like pieces of a nightmare. The infection had taken hold faster than anyone expected. Her chest burned, her head pounded, and her body felt heavier than ever. She had survived the surgery, but now survival itself demanded more strength than she thought she possessed. Meanwhile, 4 years later, Adrian was in his office, sitting behind the same polished mahogany desk that had witnessed both his triumphs and his failures. The memory of the cafeteria conversation, the mention of twins who looked like him, haunted him like an unfinished sentence. He had been so close, yet he had ignored the truth that had been under his nose all along. His assistant, Myra, noticed the subtle tremor in his hands as he absent-mindedly flipped through reports. She had seen the man who controlled the world crumble in his personal life, albeit unknowingly. She could no longer stay silent. She took a deep breath and walked into the office, her steps deliberate, her voice steady despite the storm behind her eyes. "You deserve to know the truth," she said, placing a hand firmly on the edge of the desk. Adrian looked up, confusion immediately twisting his sharp features. "What are you talking about?" he asked, suspicion underlying the words. Mara swallowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. Her heart pounded, not for herself, but for the truth that she could no longer hide. She had been a witness to Amara's pain, her courage, her silent sacrifice. And now it was time Adrian understood what he had ignored, what he had almost lost forever. The woman who saved your life is the mother of your twins. The words hit him like a thunderclap. For a moment the world froze. His blood seemed to chill in his veins, a slow, creeping ice that paralyzed him entirely. His lungs refused to draw air. His heart skipped and slammed, struggling to maintain its rhythm against the shock that threatened to tear his composure apart. Adrian's mind raced. No, this couldn't be real. He had avoided her for years. He had convinced himself she had deceived him, that she had hidden from him, that she was gone. Yet the words floated in the air, undeniable. "What? What did you say?" His voice cracked, low and raw, as if the sound itself carried the weight of years lost. Mara held his gaze, steady but sympathetic. "She's in the hospital right now, because of you." The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian's chest tightened, his body rigid with shock and sudden guilt. He could feel the icy fingers of regret curling into every part of him. The image of Amara, pale, fragile, yet unwavering, flashed before his eyes. The twins he had never met, the life he had never acknowledged. It all collided inside him like a storm of his own making. His hands, usually so steady and commanding, trembled slightly on the desk. He wanted to stand, to run, to demand answers, to fix everything instantly. But the enormity of what he had ignored held him in place. She risked everything for me," he whispered, disbelief and anguish mixing in equal measure. Myra nodded, her own eyes glistening slightly. "She didn't want you to know. She didn't want your gratitude. She just wanted you to live, and now she's paying the price for it." Adrian's chest tightened further. The walls of his carefully controlled world crumbled with each word. Every moment he had spent ignoring her, dismissing her, walking away from her, now pressed down on him like a physical weight. Images of the twins flashed in his mind. Auric and Amaya, their blue eyes a mirror of his own, their lives entwined with hers, innocent and vulnerable. How had he let this happen? How had he abandoned them? How had he allowed pride and fear to keep him from the family he had created without even knowing it? Panic surged within him. The calm, controlled CEO facade he wore so effortlessly shattered under the realization of the truth. He grabbed Mara's arm, desperate for guidance. "Take me to her. Now. I need I need to see her." Mara hesitated for a moment, understanding the magnitude of what he was feeling. "Are you sure? You might not be prepared for what you'll see." Adrian's jaw tightened, his blue eyes blazing with determination and raw emotion. "I have to see her. I have to fix this. I have to make it right." The trip to the hospital was a blur. Adrian barely noticed the city passing by in the limousine. His mind was consumed with images of Amara, pale, weakened, yet somehow strong enough to save him, even when he had refused her love. His chest tightened with every heartbeat. Guilt, regret, and a desperate hope collided in a storm he could not control. When they arrived, Adrian didn't wait for instructions. He ran through the hospital corridor, ignoring the curious looks, ignoring the orderly attempts to direct him. Every step brought him closer to her, and closer to the truth he had avoided for so long. The moment he reached her room, he froze at the door. Machines beeped softly, monitors displayed her fragile condition, and the faint scent of antiseptic filled his senses. But the sight of her, pale, trembling, hooked up to tubes yet still alive, stole his breath completely. He stepped closer, unable to speak. His hands shook slightly. He could feel every second of the 4 years he had lost, every choice he had made to walk away, every moment he had ignored the life he had a right to claim. Amara stirred slightly, her eyes half-lidded, her face pale yet serene. Even in pain, even in fever, even in weakness, she retained a grace and strength that stole his breath. She had carried everything, his child, his legacy, his life, and had done so silently, selflessly. "Amara," he whispered, his voice cracking. His hands hovered near her, unsure whether to touch, whether to hold, whether to demand forgiveness or beg for it. Her eyes opened fully then, and even through the pain she recognized him. A flicker of emotion crossed her features, fear, longing, and something else he couldn't name immediately. Adrian's chest heaved. The man who had once been ruthless, cold, untouchable, now trembled with vulnerability. He had never allowed himself to feel. Mara, standing silently at the edge of the room, gave him a nod and stepped back. This was his moment, the moment where all consequences, all guilt, all pain converged. The moment where his actions, or inactions, would meet reality face to face. Adrian knelt beside her bed, gripping her hand with desperate intensity, tears brimming in his blue eyes. I am so sorry," he whispered. "I ignored you. I walked away. I was a fool. I don't deserve you. But I can't let you go. Not now. Not ever." Amara's lips quivered. Her breathing was shallow, weak, but the flicker of life, strength, and love in her eyes remained. She looked at him, and for the first time in years she allowed herself to hope. She tried to speak, but the infection made it painful, a low whisper escaping her lips. You have a chance. Live. But her words trailed off, the weight of her condition holding her down. Adrian gripped her hand tighter, leaning close. "I'll fix this. I'll stay. I'll make it right, I swear." But even as he spoke, a deep, gnawing fear pressed down on both of them. The infection was still raging. Every heartbeat was a race. Every second mattered. And the truth of their situation, painful, fragile, and yet undeniable, hung between them like a sword poised to fall. Mara leaned closer, whispering in a voice heavy with dread. "Amara, she's in critical condition. If we don't act now, she might not make it. And Adrian, it's because of what happened years ago." Adrian's face drained of color as the weight of those words hit him, leaving him frozen between desperation, guilt, and the overwhelming need to save the woman who had always loved him. Adrian burst through the hospital corridors, his footsteps echoing sharply against the polished floors. Each stride was driven by fear, guilt, and a fury he had never felt before. The boardrooms, the meetings, the empire he had built, all meaningless in this moment, all irrelevant. All of it could vanish, and it would not matter as long as she was alive. His hands shook violently, his breath ragged and uneven. He had no plan, no strategy, no carefully constructed facade of control. For the first time, Adrian Blackwood, the man feared by colleagues and revered by rivals, was utterly powerless. Every corner he rounded reminded him of the years he had lost, the opportunities to hold her, to protect her, to love her without pretense. He cursed himself with every step. 4 years, 4 years of pride, of ignorance, of denial. And now the woman who had given him life, literally, was hanging by a thread because of what he had done. He skidded into her room, pushing past a nurse who tried to stop him. Machines hummed steadily, but Adrian didn't notice. The smell of antiseptic, the sterile whiteness, the rhythm of monitors. It all became background noise to the storm inside him. And then he saw her. Amara lay pale and fragile on the bed. Tubes snaked around her body, feeding her, monitoring her, supporting the life she had fought so hard to sustain. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Her eyes were closed, her face ghostly in its exhaustion, yet she remained beautiful in a way that stole his breath, even now. He ran to her side without thinking. His hands reached for her, shaking as they met her cold skin. He clasped her fingers as if holding on to life itself. "Amara, sweetheart, open your eyes," he whispered, voice breaking with the weight of years lost and mistakes made. "I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." Tears fell unbidden, slipping onto her hands, her arms, her cheeks. Adrian pressed his forehead to hers, feeling the faint warmth of her body, the weak pulse of her veins beneath his touch. It was a moment suspended between life and death, between love denied and love finally confessed. He realized in that moment the full gravity of what he had done. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. He had walked away from the life they had created together, from the children they had brought into the world, from the woman who had given him a second chance at life without asking for anything in return. The guilt hit him like a physical force. Every past insult, every cold word, every time he had told her, "I don't want you," replayed in his mind. Every tear she had cried, every lonely night she had endured, every decision she had made to protect him and the twins, all of it crashed over him in a wave of shame and desperation. "I should have been here," he choked out, voice thick and raw. "I should have fought for you. I should have loved you properly, and I failed you, Amara." Her fingers twitched faintly beneath his grip. He felt the smallest sign of life, and hope, fragile and tender, fluttered in his chest. He whispered again, his voice cracking with emotion he had long suppressed. "I love you, Amara. I've loved you from the moment I realized you weren't just my secretary. You were my heart. And I walked away. I was a fool. I am a fool. But please, please don't leave me now. Don't leave our children. Don't leave me." He leaned closer, brushing strands of hair from her forehead. Each gesture was a silent plea, a desperate attempt to undo the past, even though he knew nothing could truly erase the years of pain he had caused. Nurses hovered at the edge of the room, monitoring her vitals and glancing at him warily. He ignored them, focused only on her. Their presence was irrelevant. Her life, her fragile form, her breath. These were all that mattered. Adrian's hands remained clasped around hers, fingers intertwined as if by sheer force he could anchor her to life, keep her from slipping away. His tears continued to fall, staining the white sheets beneath her. Each tear carried his remorse, his longing, and the confession of love he had withheld for far too long. He remembered the night she had told him she was pregnant. The coldness in his response, the sharp rejection, the way he had vanished. He could see it now with clarity, and the image made his chest ache. He had been blind to the truth, blind to love, blind to the family that existed because of them. Now, in this stark hospital room, stripped of pride and power, he was forced to confront every decision he had made. Every choice had led to this moment. Every misstep had culminated in her lying fragile before him, fighting for life while he had spent years walking away. He pressed his lips to her knuckles, inhaling the faint antiseptic scent mixed with her natural warmth. "Please, please survive," he whispered, voice trembling. "For me, for the twins, for everything I failed to give you." The monitors continued their rhythmic beeping, but suddenly the tone changed. The once steady hum became more urgent, more alarming. Lights blinked, numbers spiked and dipped unpredictably. Adrian's head snapped up. He scanned the room, panic flooding him like ice water. Nurses rushed forward, their faces tight with concern. He could see her struggle even in unconsciousness. Her body convulsed slightly under the strain, and he gripped her hand harder, trying to stabilize her through sheer will. "I'm here, Amara. I won't let you go. I swear I will not let you leave me," he yelled, his voice cracking through the sterile room. Machines beeped louder, urgent and harsh. The monitors flashed warnings. Nurses barked commands at each other, adjusting tubes, injecting medication, working frantically to keep her stable. Adrian felt helpless in a way he had never known. Money, power, influence, they were meaningless here. Nothing could fix this except her strength, and his prayers, and perhaps the mercy of fate. His mind raced. He remembered the twins again, Arik and Amaya. Were they aware of the danger she was in? Were they awake? Did they know how much their mother had sacrificed for them? Fear gripped him as tightly as hope did, twisting his chest until it hurt to breathe. He pressed closer to her, whispering her name again and again. "Amara, please, stay with me. I love you. I've always loved you. Please don't leave." Her eyelids fluttered slightly, a tiny imperceptible sign of life. He leaned closer, his tears falling freely. "That's it. Stay with me. Please stay." The room felt suspended in time. The world outside ceased to exist. Only her and him, life and death, love and regret, entwined in the quiet chaos of the hospital room. Adrian felt a determination he had never known before. He would fight for her, for the twins, for every moment he had stolen from their lives. He would never let pride, fear, or arrogance take from him again. Not now, not ever. But even as he whispered promises and prayers into her fragile ears, a cold dread ran through him. The beeping of the machines grew louder, more frantic. Every indicator screamed danger. Suddenly, the monitors shrieked in unison, alarms piercing the sterile air. And one of the nurses shouted urgently, "Her vitals are crashing. She's going into septic shock." Adrian's hands tightened on hers. His heart pounded. For the first time in his life, he truly understood the price of every choice he had ever made, and that price was about to demand everything. Adrian's heart raced like never before. The shrill beeps of the monitors, the hasty commands of nurses, and the urgent movements of doctors all blurred into a chaotic symphony. Yet amid the chaos, his world narrowed to one single truth. Amara. She was here, fragile, fighting for life, and he would not leave her side. His hands clutched hers with an intensity born from panic and desperation. His grip, usually steady in the boardroom or in negotiations, now trembled uncontrollably. Every beat of her weak pulse beneath his fingers sent a jolt through him, as if reminding him that life could be snatched away in an instant. And he had wasted years ignoring the most precious parts of his own life. "Save her, please, save her," he yelled, voice breaking, echoing in the sterile room. "I'll give anything, my money, my empire, my life. Just keep her alive." The nurses exchanged glances, understanding his desperation. Adrian, the ruthless, untouchable CEO, was exposed for the first time, not in power but in helplessness. The man who could command companies, manipulate markets, and bend people to his will now had no control over the one thing he truly wanted to protect: her. Dr. Lewis, calm but focused, barked instructions. Nurses moved like synchronized shadows, adjusting IVs, monitoring vitals, administering medications. Every second stretched like hours. Every heartbeat was a reminder of the stakes. Adrian refused to leave, even as fatigue and fear threatened to collapse him. Hours dragged on. The room was tense, suffused with the scent of antiseptic and the unspoken prayers of those present. Adrian remained kneeling at her bedside, holding her hand, whispering soft words over and over, even when she couldn't respond. "Stay with me. Please, Amara, don't leave. I need you." Time became meaningless. He lost track of minutes, hours, the outside world. All that mattered was her life. All that mattered was that she lived. And through the haze of exhaustion, he recognized something deeper. He had never stopped loving her. Not for a second. Even when he walked away, even when he pretended indifference, every heartbeat had been hers. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Lewis exhaled and turned to Adrian. "She's stabilized, but barely. She's weak, fragile, and every step from here will be critical." Adrian exhaled shakily, leaning his forehead against hers. Relief flooded him, but fear lingered. He knew the battle was far from over. This was survival by a thread, and every thread was precious. She stirred weakly, her eyelids fluttering open. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, found his immediately. The connection, unbroken even by years of distance and silence, surged between them. "Why? Are you here?" she whispered, voice fragile, tremulous, carrying the weight of disbelief. "Because I can't lose you." "Not again," he said, voice low, hoarse with emotion, yet filled with unshakable conviction. "Not you, not our children, not the life I should have fought for years ago." Her gaze dropped, tears slipping down her cheeks. She turned slightly, as if shielding herself from the raw vulnerability she saw reflected in his face. "You didn't want me, Adrian," she murmured. Her voice carried both sorrow and the faintest accusation, a reminder of the pain he had caused her. Adrian's chest tightened. Every memory of rejection, every cruel word he had uttered, every moment of pride that kept him from embracing love, pressed on him like a physical weight. He bowed his head, swallowing hard. His throat burned with unshed tears, and his hands shook as they continued to hold hers. "I didn't want love, but I've been in love with you since the day you walked into my office," he admitted, voice breaking with a mixture of regret and fervor. The words, finally spoken aloud, hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. Her tears fell freely now. She wanted to pull away, to shield herself from the pain of betrayal and years lost, but the sincerity in his eyes, the rawness of his emotion, held her still. She could feel every word in her bones, every beat of his heart mirrored by hers. You lied to me," she whispered, voice quivering. "All those years." "I didn't lie," he said quickly, desperation creeping into his tone. "I was afraid. Afraid I'd ruin everything. Afraid I didn't deserve you. Afraid I'd lose you, even if I fought for you. But now I know. I can't bear a world without you. I can't lose you, Amara. Not now, not ever." Her fingers twitched within his grasp. The fever and infection had weakened her, but her heart, her soul, responded to the confession she had longed for, feared, and yet never doubted entirely. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the man before her, the man she had loved silently for so long, was sincere. "Adrian, it's too late," she whispered softly, shaking her head. You walked away. You left me to bear everything alone." "I know," he said, tears falling freely now. "And I will spend every second making it right. I will stay with you. I will fight for you, for us, for our children. Please, just let me. Just let me try to make up for the years I lost." Her breathing was shallow, weak, but each word, each confession, each tear exchanged created a fragile bridge between them. The pain, the betrayal, the years of separation, all of it began to bend under the weight of love rediscovered, yet unspoken truths still hovered, fragile and dangerous. Adrian leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently against hers. The sound of the monitors, once terrifying, now became a rhythm, a heartbeat of shared hope. "I promise," he whispered, "I'll never leave you again. I'll fight for you, Amara. Every moment. I'll make sure you and our children are safe, always." Her lips trembled, a soft sound escaping her throat, a mixture of hope, fear, and lingering doubt. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that the man before her, who had finally shed his mask, was capable of love without condition. "Adrian," she murmured, her voice faint, trembling with exhaustion. "Yes?" he whispered, eyes never leaving hers. I want to believe you," she said softly. "But I'm so tired. I'm so afraid I'll lose everything again." He pressed her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "You won't. I swear I will never let you go. Not now, not ever. I'll fight for you until my last breath, Amara. You're mine, and I'm yours. Always." The monitors around her beeped steadily, but suddenly a subtle warning tone sounded, small, almost insignificant, but enough to remind them that danger still lingered. Adrian noticed it immediately, heart leaping. Nurses rushed forward, adjusting the machines, and he tightened his grip on her hand, refusing to let go. This moment, this fragile bridge between them, could not collapse. Not now, not after everything they had endured. Adrian's eyes widened in sudden alarm as the monitors around her began to spike rapidly. One nurse shouted, "Her infection is returning. We need to act fast." Adrian's chest tightened, and he whispered through clenched teeth, "No, not now. She can't leave me. Not now." The battle for Amara's life and their love was far from over. Adrian did not leave the hospital. From the moment the doctor stabilized Amara, he remained at her side, a constant presence, a living promise that he would never walk away again. Every day he was there, first light to last breath of the ward lights, never straying from her fragile form. He fed her when she had no strength to lift a spoon, his hands trembling but determined. Each bite, each sip, was a gesture of devotion he had been too proud to show before. His eyes never left hers, searching for the smallest sign that she was healing, that she was beginning to trust him again. When the twins arrived, Adrian was ready. He had seen them in photographs and heard stories from friends, but now he held them. Arek's small fingers wrapped around his thumb. Amaya's laughter, light and musical, filled the sterile hospital room like sunlight breaking through clouds. He whispered soft promises into their tiny ears, vowing to protect them, love them, and never abandon them as he had abandoned their mother. Amara watched him quietly. Her body was still weak, still recovering from infection and surgery, yet her heart was beginning to feel the cautious stirrings of hope. Each day, each act of devotion from Adrian, each small sacrifice, built a bridge over the chasm of hurt that had separated them for years. He signed the twins' birth certificates without hesitation, acknowledging them publicly, embracing his role as their father. The official act was more than bureaucracy. It was a declaration, a binding of himself to the family he had once refused to see. He confronted Amara's mother, shielding her from her wrath, from judgment, from the social pressures that had once terrified her. He stood between them, unwavering, resolute. No threat, no argument, no arrogance could undo the love he had finally embraced, and he made sure she understood that. Each day, Adrian rebuilt her trust with quiet, consistent actions. Words alone could not heal the years of betrayal. He knew that. But patience, protection, presence, and unwavering commitment began to mend the wounds that had seemed permanent. When the day of her discharge came, Adrian's heart raced. He walked beside her, steady and reassuring, but his mind was consumed with anticipation and reverence. This was the moment when fragile recovery would step out into the sunlight, when trust would either bloom or falter. Outside, the late afternoon sun spilled across the hospital entrance, golden and warm. Adrian stopped. He looked at Amara, her arm in his, her eyes still slightly uncertain, still fragile, still hesitant. And he did something he had never done before. He knelt. His tailored suit folded neatly around him, but it could not hide the vulnerability in his blue eyes, the raw honesty that had taken years to surface. His hands found hers again, fingers entwining. "I don't deserve a second chance," he said softly, his voice catching. "But if you give me one, I promise I will spend my entire life making up for the pain I caused." Her lips quivered. Tears began to slip down her cheeks, not tears of sorrow, not tears of hurt, but the long-awaited release of pain finally giving way to peace. She had endured so much, carried so much, and now the man who had once been the source of her heartache was the one begging to heal it. "Adrian, we deserve a family," she whispered, voice tender, trembling with emotion. He leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to her forehead. The gesture was simple, yet it spoke of humility, love, and devotion, a silent vow stronger than any spoken words. The twins, Arek and Amaya, giggled suddenly and ran into their arms, wrapping themselves around both of their parents. The sound of laughter, the warmth of family, and the closeness of bodies created a perfect, fleeting world where nothing else mattered. Adrian held them all together, letting the weight of love and redemption anchor him. Let the light of forgiveness fill the empty spaces of the years he had lost. He felt their small hearts beating against his chest and knew that he would never allow fear, pride, or arrogance to separate them again. Amara's eyes shone with trust, her lips curved in a gentle, grateful smile. She rested her head against his shoulder, finally allowing herself to believe that love could be safe, that protection could be genuine, and that the man before her had truly changed. Adrian looked down at her, then at the twins, then back to her again. His blue eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "We are ours," he whispered. "All of us. Together." The world outside the hospital faded, the beeping of monitors, the distant footsteps of staff, the city beyond the windows, all of it disappeared into insignificance. There was only Amara, the twins, and the life they would build together. He kissed her gently again, this time on her lips, a kiss full of reverence and promises. It was a kiss that spoke of years lost and found, of pain and healing, of mistakes acknowledged and forgiveness given. Amara rested against him, her arms around his neck, their bodies close, their souls intertwined. The years of hurt, betrayal, and solitude melted into a moment of clarity, of certainty, of belonging. The twins, giggling and playful, tugged at his hands and her dress, pulling them into a circle of family warmth. Adrian laughed softly, a sound rare and precious, and felt the weight of his ruthless past lift ever so slightly. This was the family he had once rejected, the love he had once denied, and now the life he would never let go of again. The man who had once said, "I don't want you," now held her like she was the only thing he had ever wanted in his life. Every moment, every heartbeat, every breath was dedicated to her, to their children, to their family. The sun began to set, bathing them in soft golden light. Time seemed to slow, granting them a sacred moment of peace, a victory over years of mistakes and misunderstandings. The laughter of the twins, the warmth of Amara in his arms, and the sound of their hearts beating in harmony created a melody more powerful than any boardroom triumph or material success. Adrian whispered softly into her hair, "I will never leave you. Never. Not now, not ever. This is our forever." Amara's hands traced the lines of his face, memorizing him as if for the first time and the last. "Forever," she breathed, the single word carrying a lifetime of hope, trust, and renewed love. They held each other close, the weight of past betrayals dissolving into the present moment. The twins nestled happily between them, giggling, squealing, and anchoring the fragile, perfect peace that had finally been won. Outside, the world continued to move, indifferent and relentless, but inside that hospital room, a family had been restored, hearts had been healed, and love had triumphed over every shadow of the past. Adrian's lips pressed once more to Amara's forehead, tender, reverent, and full of promise. He whispered, "You are my everything." And in that moment, surrounded by the laughter of their children and the warmth of love finally reclaimed, the man who had once walked away had finally come home. As Adrian held Amara and the twins close, the hospital intercom crackled. "Dr. Lewis to the emergency wing. We have a critical situation." Adrian's grip tightened instinctively. He knew life was fragile. Love was fragile, but for the first time he was willing to fight for every second of it. The story of redemption, truth, and forever had begun, but fate was never done testing them.